welcome to another war game review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
Today we're taking a look at, let me get it in the shot, At All Costs from Hollandspiele. And this is a game that's designed by Tim Taylor, the late Tim Taylor, I believe.
Yes.
I think he passed away just a year ago.
Yeah, they passed away about a year ago, yep.
So this is part of our Guns of August World War I kind of event that we're doing, trying to plow through all of our World War I games. And this,
we're making good progress.
Yeah.
We really have.
I'm impressed that we've still got steam, still going through this.
Yeah, I'm having a blast with it, frankly.
I was worried we'd get burnt out, but no.
Yeah.
Not the case. And this game contributes to that because it is a World War I game, but it is purely East Front.
Yep.
It's this big operational game, but it's very different from any of the other games we've played so far. So this event that we keep playing all these games still feels very fresh.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a two-player game. It is a something of a card-driven game.
Mm-hmm.
The cards are the core of being able to do many of the things that you need to do in this game. But it isn't. It's nothing like something like Paths of Glory, for example. It's a little bit smaller than that in this scale. But you have the Russian, so Imperial Russia, and then you've got the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians, and the onus is on them to basically invade Russia, take ground, destroy the Russian armies for them to win. The Russians conversely have to destroy the German and Austro-Hungarian armies, and then basically retain their territory, and if possible, launch counterattacks, take Danzig, a couple other important areas that are kind of on that German border. So it plays from 1914. You can play all the way up through 1919, which would, you get into some history there, but the whole war is available to you. There's also a number of scenarios that kind of break that down, or there's a bunch of alternative historical things. You can play in like 1899, and even earlier than that with some of the plans that Malka and that had put together. But it plays in about 3 hours if you play the whole thing.
Right.
But this has auto victory conditions which can be met.
And some of the scenarios can be 2 hours.
Yeah.
Right? I think ours was about 2 hours. I made this comment as we were playing it. This actually felt very fresh.
Yes.
I thought its mechanics were very well integrated. They worked very well together. I thought the multi-use cards were brilliant. I really liked that they were also, you had that choice of, do I buy cards?
Yeah.
And you can't look at those cards.
Yes.
So you can't go, oh, I'm going to buy one card. Oh, I'm going to buy a second card because I now got what I need. You gotta, I'm gonna buy 3 cards.
Yeah.
And you only have 5 or 6
you gotta buy
build
those
points
before you buy any units. So
yeah.
The economy aspect of this is really cool. And it represents there is some economy if you lose your industrial areas.
Right.
You have fewer of those build points. But to me, it's more of just, that's the economy of the game. That's the core of the game. Getting more guys or getting more cards to do operations with.
Yeah.
And that logistical balance of, I'm either going to get a bunch of cards but have no guys, or I need a bunch of guys but I'm not going to be able to do anything.
Yep. Well, and that's the key. There are really 2 types of cards. There are event cards that are red.
Yeah.
And they're things like, add some more dice in combat, or bad weather to stop a combat.
Or ignore a number of losses that you have to take.
Ersatz is what those were called. And then there's blue cards that act as your offensives.
Yes.
Some are major offensives, some are minor offensives, or they're called limited, I believe.
Limited, yeah.
But yeah, that was a very cool part of the game.
I really liked so we played 300 Earth and Water a few months ago, and that was one of the first games where it was like, you have this pool of money, you've got to buy cards, and then you buy units.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I love that. I love that economy. That's exactly the same as it is here, except you are not allowed to look at your cards. So you might say, I need to be able to do a bunch of things, so I'm going to buy 4 cards. Then I've got 2 points, I'm going to buy 2 guys. Then you look at your cards, and you're like, these are actually crap, and I've wasted my money.
Right.
You get that extra kind of like kick in the balls, which is not very fun, but it makes for a fun game experience.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this turn's going to be very sluggish.
Yep.
But the flip side of that is if you don't have any offensive cards, you have a lot of defensive cards. Mm-hmm. You can use them as these ersatz, absorbing losses. So whilst you might not make any progress, I'm not going to get counterattacked and lose all my ground.
Yeah.
And I think, that all of that kind of ties into this whole World War I aspect where making progress is very difficult and very costly.
Right.
And the cards help you to do that. You either have good offensive cards, or you're like, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But if you've got good offensive cards,
man,
you haven't built units.
Yeah. So you don't have the resources to attack.
So
really.
You're going to do some attack, but you might get exhausted. Your units are going to get dripped away, and then you're going to get counterattacked once you've used all your cards. I love that aspect of this.
Yeah. And I made the comment when we were playing it in regard to that element. This one really felt like a game.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
Really felt like a very interesting game. There were a lot of the dice mechanic is very interesting. Units hit on a 1 more often than not.
Yeah, most units hit on 1s. Yeah.
The German soldiers are hit on 2s, and then you have event cards that can make some units hit on 2s and 3s.
Or you entrench to get your defensive.
So you hit on a 2.
But when you attack, you're still a 1.
Yeah, so there's just a lot of that gaminess to understand how am I going to build my army? How am I going to maintain my army with supply? How am I going to move out to threaten you and force you to start, doing things that you don't necessarily want to do? And then also ultimately figuring out how to take the victory point cities, how to get you out of those forts.
And keep them in supply as well.
Yeah, and keep them in supply. Supply is a very cagey part of this game. It was also very cool that it used the rail system. Yeah. I thought that was very neat. And if you look at this map, the one thing I was concerned about the game when I looked at the map, I was like, wow, that's a busy map. Because they've got trench lines, they've got city names, both in Cyrillic and in English, several different types of terrains. You've got, territory marks, and then rail lines. So it kind of creates
there's a whole bunch of stuff on the map.
It just makes it like, ooh, am I really in that territory? And I found it very interesting having to search for those routes that the trains connected, through to get to supply.
And like all good war games, the map is such a key component.
Yeah.
And the way that areas are drawn and divided up, and how the rails do or do not cross certain borders and go through certain areas,
make it a challenge.
Always so cool. It's so cool seeing why those things are done and what it enables you to do. Some things you're like, I can send a strike force down this way because I'm going to stay in supply. But if I start to veer over to the right, I'm getting into territories which now is much, much more risky to keep in supply.
Yeah.
It's easier for those to be cut.
A really interesting, I thought it was Bessarabia. Where was I? Yeah, this northern Bessarabia was a very interesting drawn section because it allowed me to stay in supply because I couldn't keep my rail, but you can also get supply by 2 spaces, then connecting to a rail. So that was very well drawn to allow the German player, Central Power player to... So those kind of things I think are always fascinating.
Yeah.
They just make for an interesting puzzle. You got to stay in supply. It's very devastating not to be in supply in this game. And, frankly, the other thing I really liked about the supply is you got further and further east as the CP, it was very hard to stay in supply.
Yeah, like all good East Front games, regardless of period, your supply lines are so important, and the further you stretch them, the more precarious they are, the easier they are to cut, the easier it is to get isolated. And that's very present in this game as well.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think I really, really enjoyed in this, like you said, is that it felt like it was an enjoyable head-to-head game first that simulates World War One.
Yeah.
Rather than it being like, oh, we're going to make like the crispiest, crunchiest simulation, and it's going to be all these things. Oh, it also happens to be a game.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a Hollandspiele kind of hallmark, is that almost all of their games are games.
Yeah.
Like,
they're very eminently playable.
Yes, and we'll have multiple strategies and things to do, and you will sit down and you will have fun doing it.
Yeah.
And this was very, very enjoyable. I got absolutely pummeled in this.
Right.
But,
the dice rolling was on my side for sure.
But it was still very enjoyable.
Yeah.
And even like at the bitter end, I'm like, I have so many cool things I can try to do to stick around in this. And I also, learned a few lessons that are very important about what to do next time. And that's, this is a game that's going to reward you playing it a couple times.
Absolutely.
And you're like, okay, the first time we kind of learned some stuff. All right.
Mm-hmm.
The second time, everyone's a bit more wary of like, okay, if I commit everything here, I've got a big hole here. Mm-hmm. Or if I, is it worth ceding a bit of ground and then entrenching to be able to defend better?
And I think that's the thing you talked about. That would have been wise to consolidate some of your... Because your armies... You have a lot of them, but they're not really powerful.
Yeah, I can have a maximum of 6 units in an army, whereas the Germans can have like 10.
10. And
whilst you don't always have all of those full and all of them, it can make a difference. If a 10 strength army comes up against a 3 strength army, that's one's going to outlast the other.
Yeah.
And you get once again that element of attrition, which is going to win.
It felt that attrition was very real. The other thing I really enjoyed about the way the build points work was as the Central Powers, I keep saying German, it's also Austria-Hungary, but they get to go first, they buy their cards and they buy their units. So you're placing those units out in these armies, trying to plan your offensives for the next turn. And then you get to go as the Russian player, and a lot of times you're trying to really throw that cog in the wheel by throwing a unit or two into a certain area just so you can last and stop the CP from taking that territory.
I enjoyed that as well from the standpoint of this is a World War I game. So your contested or disputed areas, you can continue, as long as they're in supply, you can train as many guys in there as you can fit. And so,
so it was never safe. You could never relax as a CP player. Because at any time, you could put 2 or 3 guys and really make it tough.
Yeah, as long as it's in supply, I can stick them right in there. Oh, you killed 2 guys in my army last time.
I'm going to replace them.
They're back again.
Yeah.
Sure, I had to spend my build points on that, but I don't know. Like in a lot of other games, in different periods, it's like, oh, you can't put replacements anywhere where there's enemies or in zones of control. This one's like, no. You got to fill up your trenches. You got to fill them up, throw those guys in, and that feels very World War One. Feels very Russian as well.
Yeah. Just fill the holes with bodies.
That's the solution to so many problems that they've had over the centuries.
That attritional element was real here.
Yeah.
The attrition not only of the different types of combat. Artillery get to fire first, and then they get to fire on the attacking side in the combat as well.
Yes, which is nice.
That was very cool, because I started thinking about, I need to put an artillery here, consolidate those, and all of a sudden I can really hurt your force very badly. So I'm not going to take any losses. So you got to think about that too, because you can't plug those holes as the CP player. You need to get cards. Cards, I think, are more important for the CP player than they are for the Russian early.
Whoever's on the offensive needs the cards. You have to have the cards to launch offensives, basically, at all.
Yeah.
But
there's got to be a balance, too, because you got to have dudes to survive, or you're just going to be wiped out.
Well, but that's the cool arc of this game, right? Is the CP player is very strong early on, and your troops are better trained. You're going to hit...
On a 2 for infantry.
1 in 3 instead of 1 in 6.
Yeah.
But... your build points just fall off a cliff halfway through the game.
Yep.
And I think it's post 1917, you start just losing victory points at the end of every year.
Yeah.
Because you
haven't won yet.
You need to have pushed forward and forced the Russians to sign that Treaty of Brest-Litovsk and end the war.
Yeah.
You need to do that to win. I just think it's so cool.
Yeah.
You get the story of that game, the arc of history, but also...
And it's
so much of it's open to you, though.
Yeah, and it's a pendulum. CP start powerful, they're gonna get less and less powerful, and then it's like an inverse axis.
Yeah.
Then the Russians get powerful, and it's just very cool. The other thing that's very neat about the time track is sometimes for the CP it'll be like, the 11th German Army loses 2 guys and the army marker, and it's like, what?
Yep.
So something historical that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, those were taken off and sent off probably
Yeah,
to the West
probably
Front
to the
or
West
done something
Front.
else.
And that was very cool because it threw a cog once again in my war machine.
Yes.
That I had to figure out how to adjust. But then I liked how they have replacements move around on the rail lines, because all of a sudden I have a couple guys that don't have an army anymore, and I can use those to plug other holes. Just very well done. The replacement system's done well. The build points are really cool. The economy of the cards versus the units, very well done.
Yes. What I'll do is I'll show you this map in the game and how it works, and then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So here's a look at the sideways map. You have Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire starts over here, and then this is Imperial Russia. So early on in the game, you've got all your forces lined up over here. Turn tracks just off camera over here, and a little victory point track as well. So you do have these off-map army holding boxes, and here you're going to line up your troops and then your kind of auxiliary assets. This is in the 9th Army box. This corresponds to the German Black 9 Army over here. The Austro-Hungarian 2nd is this 1 2nd Army box with this little 1 infantry in it here. Russians have all the same things as well. They're the green ones. So you do have all your stuff held off there. We've got a couple single units, because units can be on their own outside of armies. You just got to be careful with stacking once that's the case. But this is a 2-player kind of card game, so one player is going to you have a hand of cards each, and your cards are either these kind of red, more like event or ersatz defensive cards, or you have these blue-topped limited offensive cards. Now, all your cards are drawn from the same deck, and the deck is a 50-50 mix of these blue and red cards. The blue and red is, again, just those different types of cards. There's not like, oh, one's for one player, one's for the other. There's not really much of that. So starting with the CP player, they're going to play a card. You can either pass on your turn, or you can play a limited offensive. Once both players pass consecutively, the turn ends. So they're going to play a little offensive over here. Let's play this one. Kind of allows all units to move, and units may initiate battles and conduct combat. Or a limited offensive allows all units to move. Units may initiate 2 battles and conduct combat in 2 battles. So, if you don't play an offensives card, you can move 1 unit, and that unit cannot move into like an enemy area and initiate a battle. Can't do any fights if you will. So you need to have the blue cards, the offensive cards, to be able to like conduct war, basically. So you play an offensive card, and you say, okay, I'm going to move a whole bunch of my units. Well, most of your units can move 1 space. So these little armies, they're going to move, going to move, going to move. These guys are already in combat in this area. These guys are going to come up and attack these guys here. And these guys kind of move up into Skov and attack there. So we did all of that, and then we can initiate any battles that we want to. So to resolve a combat, you just consult all of the different units you've got in that battle, and then you roll those. So the 7th Austro-Hungarian army has 2 infantry units. The 5th Russian army has, what do we have? 1 infantry unit. That's pretty pathetic. So there's a little chart on the back of the rule book. This is the theater book, and you basically say that you do a dogfight step. If you've got planes, they kind of dogfight it out. The attacker's artillery fire. We don't have any artillery. Then the defenders shoot. So I've got my 1 Russian infantry unit. He's going to roll a die. He hits on a 1. I rolled a 6. Fantastic. So that's a miss. And then we go to the attacker's fire. So the attacker's going to roll their 2 dice for their 2 infantry. The Austro-Hungarians also hit on 1s. And we scored 1 hit. So I then have to eliminate 1 guy. He's my last guy in the army. So our army is eliminated from the map. Great. I lose a victory point as the Russians, or the Central Powers player gains. a victory point, and that's basically the combat there. When you get into some of the more fancy battles, you start looking at all the different assets that you've got. So let's have a little look. Okay, let's pit some guys against each other so we can do something a bit more interesting. So we've got the Russian 6th Army. Here, we'll just stick them here. And then the German 8th Army. Yeah. So if the Germans come in and attack, they're going to roll their artillery first. So your artillery gets to shoot. Your artillery also hits on a 1. It's not great. We rolled a 1. Amazing. So your artillery does 1 hit. So the 6th Russians have to take a loss from one of their units in their army. Or they might say, well, I'm the Russians. I'm not doing any offensives. So I can play this. It says limited offensive 1. Or may play as if ersatz 1. And ersatz cards, you can play that to negate a hit, basically. You absorb the hit. Ersatz means substitute. It's a, you're sending guys up to replace them. Nothing really happens. So we're going to just spend one of our precious cards to not get hit by that artillery. Then I'm going to do my defensive fire. I've got 1 infantry and 1 cavalry and 1 artillery. So we're looking for 1s. I rolled nothing, classic. And then I do have Russian Imperial Guard. They hit on a 2, which I also missed, fantastic. And then we go to back to the German attackers. Their 8th Army has 3 infantry units in it. So they're going to roll their infantry, and German infantry hit on 1s and 2s. So they're quite strong. And they also missed, they whiffed. How classically World War I. We shot each other a whole bunch, but nothing happened. And then this area is then contested. Oh, they also do get to shoot their artillery as well. One more time. Their artillery shoots in the artillery phase and when they attack as well. Also miss. I don't know what I was expecting. Can't change the past. But that's this. You get this kind of back and forth, or if you do a surprise attack, the attacker can do all of their attacks, and then the defender absorbs the losses, then attacks back. But normally, the defenders sit there whilst the attacker's going over the top. You chuck a whole bunch of dice. Hitting is 1 in 6 or 1 in 3. That's usually the best odds you're ever going to get. You can buff your artillery to get it to a 50-50, but that's rare. You have to have the cards for it. You have to commit your cards to it. I might just then play these ersatz 2 cards to ignore all these hits that go on. Between the card play and the dice rolling, it can be very, very sticky. It can be hard to get guys to retreat or to eliminate them, which feels very World War I, and it feels very enjoyable because you might commit really hard to this offensive. Oh, I've got this big offensive. Oh, if I've got a poison gas card, I'll play that. Oh, if I've got an advanced artillery barrage, I'm going to play that. Great. You're going to do really well in 1, maybe 2 attacks, but you've now expended your entire season's worth of cards and can't do anything else. If the defender's able to weather that and still have a couple cards, you're going to get counterattacked. They're going to defend a lot of those hits using ersatz, and then they're going to attack you elsewhere. They might cut your supply lines. This guy's now going to start getting hurt with supply during the production phase. Very, very, very cool. But that's kind of the core of this game. It's playing cards, moving guys, doing attacks, making sure you've got supply. You can trace 2 spaces back to a rail-linked supply chain. If you're out of supply, things get absolutely nasty for you. You will just, if you do nothing, you will just die eventually, and you'll degrade, and you'll have nothing left. But you're trying to take these red victory point spaces, you're trying to eliminate armies, all of that's going to gain you victory points. After you've done all your moves and you've gone back and forth and everyone's passed, you then spend your build points, and it's this classic choice. You have to commit, I'm going to buy 3 cards with my 5 build points, let's say, and then I've got 2 build points left. I'm going to build 2 units. I might put 1 into one of these armies, I might put 1 into another army. Or I might build, if it's that part of the war, I could build a biplane. Or I could build an artillery piece if I've got them in my pool. Or if I've lost a whole army, I can build the Austro-Hungarian Third Army, and I can build 1 infantry into that. And I can stick this guy back on the board. I can rebuild my armies from that. It's expensive and it's slow going, but you can do it if you want to commit to that. Then you look at your cards and you're like, okay, this is what I've got to play with. So the whole buying your cards, then buying your units without having looked at them is it's such a cool concept. You know, if you're strapped for cash, you might say, I'm going to buy one card and then build units. Or you might just say, sod it, I'm just going to play defensively and build only units. But having the ersatz cards will absolutely save your bacon. So it's almost more important to get some of those than it is to get that one extra unit that might absorb a hit. So that's kind of how the core of this game works. What we'll do is we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at the map. I had a blast playing this game.
This was a great time.
I will say, this is much better than I was expecting.
Yeah, I know you were a little hesitant about it.
And that's my fault.
Well,
For not, like,
Can I point-
Hollandspiele only makes bangers, okay?
we know that.
I
We've
know.
played so many
I
of
know.
them.
And it was like, oh, it's
You did that with It or On It, too, though.
I know.
You were like,
it's my own fault.
I don't want to play that
Like,
game. And I'm like,
like,
we're playing
this
it
is like
because
a
it looks
Russian
interesting.
World War One game.
But it was interesting.
Man, it was so good.
Yeah.
I really, really liked it.
And I want to play the full campaign now.
So you just want someone who's going to give you stiffer resistance. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Well, that's not what I was saying. You just need to roll better. You rolled so many sixes, it was unreal.
But
I haven't seen you roll that many sixes in forever.
I know.
It was hilarious.
But I love it. I really liked you hit on ones and twos.
Yeah.
Mostly ones. Because it still felt like this is a World War One game.
Mm-hmm.
You're just like, you're rolling a bunch of dice, you're committing a bunch of forces, but you're not making much progress.
You're just pummeling each other.
This game has a lot of turns.
Yes, it does.
And you need those turns to make the progress
23.
that you need.
Yeah.
And or you can roll really hard and like you can smoke someone. Great, that's cool.
Yep.
But like, this game's gonna kind of every victory is hard fought and hard won. You've committed a lot to it. You've chucked a whole bunch of dice to do it. You secure that area. Then you can move on to the next one. And the victory cities and victory points look like they're so far away because of that.
Yeah.
And by the time you've slowly made your way there, you're like, I'm hanging on by a thread with my supply lines. Because when your supply lines get cut, man, your armies just start dying.
Yeah.
They just start getting removed in the production phase. And it is brutal.
The other thing that I really liked about the game was the way they did trenches. Very good implementation.
Yes.
Because they didn't give you a defensive bonus like, sometimes it's absorb a hit, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I expected, but it actually improved your defensive fire value.
Yes.
Which is very different than it normally is, but I really liked that. Because going from hitting only on a 1 with your infantry to hitting on a 1 and 2 because you built a trench, man, that's powerful.
Well, yeah, you hit on the 2s, and now you're like, well, yeah, I'm much more willing to spend my ersatz cards.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
to absorb losses.
I'll shoot at 2s, and then you'll attack me coming over the top.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ersatz my way through this. But like, yes, the timing of when you build the trenches,
is
even
key.
that
Yep.
such a cool decision point of when they put it into the game. You do all these offensives, you have to still be there and to like outlast everyone. Then you spend a production point, one of your precious production points, and you can entrench a whole bunch of guys.
Yeah.
But like
four guys, right? Or you can actually
four
do
units, an army
stacks.
is a unit.
Yeah, so you can entrench a lot of people. But as that Russian player, man, that's really key.
Yeah.
That will allow you to hold off, and then putting in the key reinforcement here and there.
It's so good.
This game, I think, more often than not, is going to be a slog in that way. This was very different than I thought it would be because I rolled well.
Yes.
And I got some great cards early, so I was able to break through here, break through there. I mean, I eliminated 5 or 6 of your armies, and you just didn't have anything to fight back with.
No, yeah. Once especially early on, I had the Russian military crisis, so I was losing build points.
Yeah,
and it was like, oh my gosh,
that hurt, and I knew that would hurt you.
Yeah,
but I think this game is really going to be a much slower moving game, but it's still going to be cool and interesting.
Yes, it's very, very good.
And then you've got to protect, as a CP, you got to protect against Bulgaria. Romania coming in when they declare war, and vice versa. Bulgaria can really come in and
you can buy those guys in.
And, but it takes
guys
away from my other offensives. But You put a guy or two on that border, man, that makes that a very different. And Bucharest is a 2 victory point city.
Yep.
So you would then have to switch and build. Oh, and by the way, the Caucasus oil fields are right there.
Yep.
You're going to lose 2 build points from that. So very cool. The other thing that I wish we could play more of, and maybe the next time we play, are all those kind of historical options.
So your regular rule book, in reality, doesn't have that many rules in it.
8 pages.
Yeah, it's like 8 to 10 pages of like actual rules, and then there's like some explanations and bits and pieces which don't. But then the theatre book has the scenarios in it, of which there's a whole bunch, and there's a whole bunch of, like I said earlier, ahistorical ones that you can play. I mean, you can go back to 1879.
Yeah.
And it's like what they were planning back then. You can play that out.
Yeah.
But it has, something like
There's a lot of
12 odd pages
Yep.
of advanced rules, optional rules,
Yep.
and historical rules. Most of which are extremely cool and you should play with.
I would totally agree with that.
But
There's even some ability to take over areas like Riga, and then I can form in essence, a little mini kingdom.
yeah, you form a little Germanic kingdom.
That's
boom,
gonna
you get a
generate
victory
some
point for
victory
that.
points.
It's got a defensive
Yeah.
guy in it. You can do
It's
so much
just-
cool stuff with that.
And there's a lot of those kind of things on the map. The build point losses from the factories and the oil, I really like that element. Really a deep game. I think a game that is very playable, very interesting. And frankly, we don't say this a lot in war games. I had a good time with this. Like, it was...
We say that all the time.
Do we? But I said this was fun.
Yes.
And we don't say that very often.
I'll agree with that statement, yes. A lot of war games, it's interesting, or
Yeah.
it's really,
Yeah.
things are sobering. This one...
It was just... I don't know.
And I think I had a very enjoyable time.
Yeah, I kept that in my mind that this is a game. Let's have fun with it. Let's enjoy it. Let's go for it. And you know what? It was a good time.
Yeah,
I would love to play this again.
Yeah, at this scale, there's much more gamey aspect to it, which was very enjoyable. I agree.
And it's so beautiful. These army discs, they're numbered. So this is the 5th Russian army, and this is your marker for your little displays over here.
Yes.
And I just thought that was very cool.
Yeah.
Wasn't there an option to hide
Yep,
the contents of those
there's
armies?
rules for hidden armies so that you don't know offhand what the enemy has.
So you have a screen sitting up here, and I'm looking, the 5th Russian army, I have no idea.
Got to supply your own screen
Other than
stuff.
knowing it can only hold 6 guys. It could have 4 infantry and 2 guns, for all I know. I'm only going to know that when I attack. So that kind of was like that block war game concept. But anytime you have a design that can throw those elements in,
there's so many
it's just
modular aspects.
so deep.
Yeah.
This is a great value. I think it's 45. Or no. This one's like $70.
But because of the map is 22 by 34, so it's twice the size of theirs.
The map is really nice and colorful too. And I love the art. I just think the graphic design is very cool.
Yeah, this says like they went all out on this.
Yeah, this is one of their more expensive ones. I always get in my mind their games are $40 to $50. This one's like 70 or 75 because it's worth it. You're buying a lot of wood. You're buying a lot of displays. There's a ton of counters.
It's a full sheet and a half of counters.
Anyway, great cards.
And a deck of cards.
Great cards.
For them, it's a lot. It is.
Yeah. So anyway, Tim Taylor, great designer. The first game in this series, which was done by someone else, I'm not sure who it was called To the Last Man, and it was World War I on the West Front.
Yes.
I would love to get that because I think you can play these together.
Yes. And I don't think that was made by Hollandspiele. I don't know.
I don't think it was.
But from what I could tell reading the rules, I think you can play them concurrently.
Okay.
And the guys who, I had to force them to the West Front.
Yep. You put those over on the West Front.
They go to the West Front map. I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's 100%.
Well, that was another
true,
interesting thing. There were events that were like, force some of these guys to go to the Western Front, and you have some boxes over here that...
Or you can voluntarily commit guys to the Caucasus Front, and it's victory points one way or the other.
Right.
It's very...
Very interesting.
There's so much cool stuff in this game. Yes,
very deep. Very deep.
but also very fun.
Yes, and eminently playable. I'll say that again. This is not a difficult nor complex game.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised as well.
Yeah.
Because it were two big rule books. I was like,
This could be a little But no, we picked it up very quick.
It's a Hollandspiele game.
We started.
The
Yep.
reality is, it's got 8 pages of rules.
Yeah.
Of actual rules that you will learn
Yeah.
to immediately be able to play this game.
I'm going to go out on a limb. Of all the World War I games we've played so far, I think this is one that I really like.
Oh yeah, this has far exceeded my expectations.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, Paths of Glory I loved.
It was amazing.
Lamps Are Going Out was fantastic. This one was pretty darn good. I'm going to be honest. This was really good. I'm glad I forced us to play it.
And there's, it's true. There's also, people are like, oh, World War One games, and it's like, guess we're gonna do West Front again.
No.
I don't. There probably is a bunch of East Front World War One games.
Well, there are quite a few.
Them, though.
Yeah, Pursuit of Glory, I think is.
Yes.
No, Pursuit.
It's Illusions of Glory.
Illusions of Glory is the East Front, and that's one I want to get.
That's like a big, massive.
I know.
One, right? Like this is.
This is a little different scale.
Much quicker to play.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I don't know. It was nice playing just this and be able to focus on just this because frankly, the East Front is very interesting in World War One.
It is.
The types of combats they were getting into, big battles at Tannenberg and things like that.
Well, and both those games I mentioned, Paths of Glory and Lamps Are Going Out. The East Front is a very important part of that game.
Yes.
The West Front's going to kind of stagnate, and it's going to kind of grind to a halt.
This is where you get the
This
movement.
is where you get a lot of movement and a lot of action, and
it's all very precarious on all sides.
It is.
And one side's going to collapse very quickly.
well, if you
It's
lose a
gonna be
battle,
awesome.
and just get decimated, very possible, it's going to be very hard to recover from that.
Yeah, like
It is going to be very
there are
hard.
major consequences to things that happen in this one. And that makes it, again, very enjoyable game.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I've said enough.
Yes, at all costs from Hollandspiele. Big thumbs up from us on this one.
Yes.
Check this out. It's on their website. It's well worth it.
Yeah, this is one I would definitely buy. Even to play solo, this would be fantastic.
Yeah, and I was looking on Board Game Geek. People are like, oh, it's so great.
Yeah.
It's one of those kind of, I don't know, hidden gem almost. People don't know about this game.
I would agree.
This is very, very, very fun and very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, bravo, Tim. Great work.
Yes. So, at all costs from Hollandspiele, go check it out. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.